Hello and welcome to Stay at Home Cinema, brought to you by TIFF and Crave. We're streaming live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and on our website at tiff.net/stayathome. My name is Keith Benny. I'm the Director of Audience and Community here at TIFF. Tonight, in partnership with Pride Toronto, as part of this year's virtual festival, we're watching HBO's The Normal Heart, starting at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 4:30 if you're on the West Coast. And we're so thrilled to have Golden Globe award-winning actor and star of the film, Matt Bomer, here to introduce. I'm joining you from Treaty 13 territory, and I'm grateful to the Indigenous peoples who have been taking care of this land for thousands of years. And as it's Pride Month, I'd like to acknowledge and celebrate our Two-Spirit community. To learn more about the Two-Spirit community here in Toronto, I recommend visiting the Takaranto Indigenous Peoples Portal, which you can find online. We want to thank our key partners, the Government of Canada, the Government of Ontario, and the City of Toronto. Huge thank you as well to our corporate partners, our lead sponsor, Bell, our major sponsors, RBC, L'Oreal Paris, and Visa. All of these partners are supporting us right now while our building is shut down, and we are very grateful for that support. We'd like to give a shout out to frontline workers who are keeping us safe, fed, and healthy. A special mention to one of our community partners that does frontline work, the Toronto People with AIDS Foundation, who are tirelessly working to support their members at this critical time. We'd also like to give a big thanks to our members and donors for supporting us and keeping us going. TIFF is a not-for-profit, and like many other cultural institutions, we have been hit hard recently. To ensure we can get through this time and come back strong, we've created the For the Love of Film Fund. And if you have the means, I invite you to consider making a gift today. You can make a donation at tiff.net/loveoffilm. If you're watching via YouTube, some Matt Bomer fans perhaps, you can donate through the upper right-hand side of your screen, and thank you. Released in 2014, HBO's The Normal Heart is a tremendous achievement. This long-awaited and long-in-development adaptation of Larry Kramer's Tony Award-winning play documents the beginning of the HIV/AIDS crisis in New York in the 1980s and the community organizing that sprang up in its wake by the very community that was under siege. Kramer passed away last month, but his legacy as a playwright, as a screenwriter, as a ferocious activist is what we celebrate tonight. Directed by Ryan Murphy, the film features an all-star cast, including Matt Bomer, Jim Parsons, Mark Ruffalo, Taylor Kitsch, Julia Roberts, Joe Mantello, Jonathan Groff, and B.D. Wong, a whole host of amazing actors and talent. A shout out to our friends at the Inside Out Film Festival, where The Normal Heart had its Canadian premiere at the Lightbox. It went on to win the Primetime Emmy for Outstanding Television Movie, and Matt Bomer won a Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor in a Series, Miniseries, or Television Film for his heartbreaking portrayal of Felix Turner. Matt Bomer grew up in Texas and learned his craft at Carnegie Mellon. In 2009, he was cast as the lead in the highly popular series White Collar. Since then, he has starred in Magic Mike and Magic Mike XXL, Viper Club, and Papi Chulo, which premiered at TIFF in 2018. Most recently, you may have seen him starring in the Will and Grace reboot, as well as The Sinner, two incredibly different roles, which showcases his amazing range. He's also someone who gives back to his community, having received the New Generation Arts and Activism Award for his work in the fight against HIV/AIDS at the Steve Chase Humanitarian Awards. It's such a pleasure to have him here with us tonight. Matt Bomer, welcome to Stay at Home Cinema.
Hey, how are you? It's so good to be here with you.
It's good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to see you, talk to some Canadians. I miss it. I wish I were in Toronto right about now. And it's always good. I'm so still pinching myself that I got to be a part of this movie, so I always enjoy talking about it.
Fantastic. We're here in June in Pride Month, virtually this year. In rewatching The Normal Heart, I was struck about the present moment, and a different crisis, of course, but the same fears, anxieties, and uncertainty. How are you processing this current moment?
Well, first and foremost, I'm so grateful that our family has been able to stay healthy and use the time together to really grow closer. And my job is so transient by nature. This is the longest I've gone without having to be on an airplane in a long time. So it's been nice to get some real quality time with my family. And I'm just trying to do everything I can and help use my voice in whatever way I can to raise awareness, to thank people who are out there working, the frontline responders certainly, and to help contribute to charities and raise people's awareness about certain charities that help with COVID and everything going on with Black Lives Matter as well. It has been resonant in terms of the Normal Heart and everything that happened with Larry and ACT UP when they rose up and took to the streets as well.
So going back maybe to the start, when did you first encounter the Normal Heart and enter Larry's world?
Well, the first play of Larry's that I encountered was actually The Destiny of Me, which was the next play. Was kind of a sequel to The Normal Heart in some ways. And it just, it floored me. I was living in semi-rural Texas in the Bible Belt. No one was really talking about what was going on. I knew, even though I wasn't out really even to myself at that time, I knew that it was a part of my community somehow, that this was all affecting. And it just opened my eyes to so much. I didn't know anything that was going on other than kind of salacious headlines that I'd read in tabloids when I was at the supermarket with my mom, So it opened my eyes. It humanized so much of the experience for me. And it just moved me the way it moves people on stage to this day. And so then I got further into his work and Terrence McNally's, and it was the first time I kind of saw people from my community, drawn three-dimensionally in terms of their roles, and it just opened my eyes to everything going on at that time.
Yeah, it's been a really striking year for queer playwrights. Larry and Terrence McNally, you mentioned, and Mark Crowley, and we've lost a lot of giants recently.
Yeah, it was just like, I was really having a hard time there for a while between Martin, Terrence, and Larry. It was too much at one point. But all the heroes are leaving the building this year, and thankfully we have a new crop of great playwrights who are going to come in and keep their voice, use what they learned from their voices, and keep their voices going. But I certainly miss all those folks, and it's very sad to have lost them all back to back.
The film was in development for many, many years, much to Larry's frustration, I'm sure. And, it finally found a home, though, at HBO with Ryan Murphy at the helm. And I read that you campaigned really hard to get the role. So I'm wondering what it was about Felix that spoke to you.
I didn't even campaign so hard to get the role of Felix. I just campaigned to be a part of the project, period. And I think that's the role that Ryan Murphy saw me in. And I think one of Ryan's great gifts is that he is willing to take risks on artists who, he'd never seen me do anything like Felix before. And he somehow saw it in me and pulled it out of me and believed in me. And I think it's a real testament to who he is and what he does on a consistent basis with other artists as well. If you look at Darren Criss playing Andrew Cunanan, it's just like he sees these things in people. So I had seen the play on Broadway and was just floored by it again. And when I heard he was making the movie, I just reached out to my representation and just begged just to get a meeting with him. We had a meeting, we hit it off, and it was really almost like this sort of 2-year dance we did, because initially it was just a film. So I did a guest spot on Glee, and I did a guest spot on The New Normal, and I was kind of coming into dipping my toe into the Ryan Murphy world. And I think they were kind of my screen tests in a way, just so you could kind of see who I was. And I had a great time on those. And then, eventually HBO came on board. And at that point, I'd already engaged with Larry and kind of passed muster with him. And
what was it like to meet Larry after, encountering his play at 14 and getting to meet him?
Really surreal. Look, if you're lucky enough in this industry, you get to meet so many of the people you've idolized or lionized or learned from or been inspired by. And, oftentimes, there's a reason why they say never meet your heroes, but Larry was certainly not that case. He exceeded my expectations. He was not, at the time, he was not really, even though he still had the fire and the passion in him and was still working furiously as a writer, he was not a firebrand, there was something gentle and sweet about him, and he had this great artistic curiosity that I find, and most of the really great writers that I encounter, they all have a really they're really curious about people and the human condition, and he definitely had that in spades.
Yeah, it's something that's always struck me about the play is that for as angry as he was, it's not agitprop theater. It's not didactic. There's such a human level to that. To the
Yeah, it's just bringing you into the real experience that the community is going through, from the front lines, and I think as an audience member, certainly watching the play and even reading it, that's what moved me and opened my eyes, is that I felt you gain a new sense of empathy and compassion for what we all went through.
Mhm. And I think it's clear, we know that you're an actor who puts in the work. So what kind of research did you do to prepare to step into the role of Felix?
Oh my gosh, it was years, and through the development process, I was just trying to keep it all alive. But I studied everything from journalism at the New York Times. I spent a day at the New York Times, I think with Jacob Bernstein. He kind of showed me the ropes there, like what a typical day in Felix's life would have been like at the time. I mean, obviously a lot of it's changed now, because they're much more reliant on computers and things like that. But so everything from his day-to-day life, I went and visited his hometown in Oklahoma, and just to get a sense of where he came from. I hired another actor to just do the scenes with me, just for fun, just to like explore and do scene work, and investigate the character. And I just tried to stay as prepared as I could be, because when it did eventually start filming, I was actually doing White Collar at the same time. So I would sometimes do White Collar in the morning and the early afternoon, then go straight to set on the Normal Heart, and finish there late at night. Uh, and they were really great at orchestrating the whole schedule, but there were times when it did work out that way. Um, and thankfully it all worked out, but I just wanted to be as prepared as possible.
Yeah.
And obviously I did an incredible amount of research in terms of what the diagnosis meant at that time, and how that manifested, um, physically, and um, how it affected the community as well.
Yeah, and you really get the sense from the film too, and from other films like How to Survive a Plague, about the medical knowledge,
Yeah.
something that these men had to really develop on the fly.
Yes. Yeah. And I watched all those documentaries, and obviously spoke to Larry at length. And yeah, so it was a lot of research. But then I felt like once we started filming, it was all really worth it. And I think the first scene we filmed, which we filmed before anything else started, we filmed it on a Sunday. It was a scene. It's my character's first scene, um, when Ned comes to visit Felix at the New York Times, um, and I just had so much fun working with Mark. And I thought, oh wow, this is really special.
People talk a lot about your physical transformation in the film, which is striking. But that emotional journey too is really pronounced. From those early scenes, you as a closeted journalist to your relationship with Ned. How did you develop the kind of emotional fortitude to step into that really huge kind of character arc?
Oh man, well, it's one of those situations where I was really glad I had the script for a long time, because it is a big journey to go on, and a lot of the journey happens before the diagnosis. So um, there were sort of these points that we had to hit in the relationship, and what was going on with Felix in terms of his trajectory. And then thankfully, when you get to work with somebody like HBO, as opposed to doing this as an independent film, we got to shut down for 3 months while I lost 40 whatever pounds, and 40, 50 pounds. I can't remember how much, I can't remember. I don't want to remember how much weight I lost, but, and yeah, so we got to shut down, and then I kind of got to shift my focus. The last thing I filmed was the diagnosis, and then I went back and finished the season of White Collar. Started losing the weight the last month of that season of White Collar, and then really just shifted. I mean, I went off basically by myself for like a month to lose the weight, because who really wants to be around you when you're having to lose all that weight? You're not very fun. And it ended up being this really kind of spiritual monastic experience to where, my goodness, I just thought about it so much and focused on it so much that by the time I got back to set, I was just, you know, I felt like I was ready to go.
The play and the film are such important kind of intergenerational texts between the generation we lost and the generations that come back after that to know what happened. How has being a part of it informed your own activism and your own voice in the community?
Oh goodness. I mean, look, these were the first gay voices that resonated with me, were people who were standing up and uh, taking action on their own and taking to the streets. And I don't put myself in the same echelon as someone like Larry Kramer in terms of activism. I'm nowhere near him, but I do. I think because I engaged with this kind of drama early on, you do feel a sense of responsibility as with whatever platform you have, however small it may be or big, whatever, to use your voice to not climb up the mountain and look down on others, but to kind of reach your hand down and help other folks up too. And you see it in the streets in America right now, everyone rightfully marching and protesting. It's awe-inspiring to see. And I've even gotten out there and done a little bit myself, not to pat myself on the back at all, because there's so many people doing so much more than I am. But um, you want to engage in change for the better that's needed. And that's certainly what Larry and ACT UP were doing in the 80s.
I want to get to an audience question here. Ken Ventry, who's a TIFF contributor circle member, asks, as an out actor, are there still roadblocks or pushback to playing non-gay characters, and how far do you think the industry has come?
Yeah, there are. Oh goodness. I don't want to be politic in answering this, but I also don't want to be Pollyanna about it either. Um, yeah, it's tricky. You do run into roadblocks, and oftentimes the characters, and it's happening less and less, but oftentimes the characters that are well drawn or given a great deal of dimension are given to a straight celebrity or whoever it may be. So I think we're all just looking for opportunity, and I think it's getting better. I think we still have ways to go, for everyone in the LGBTQ spectrum, trans community as well. We've got to keep going and pushing forward and giving everyone the opportunities that they need. And but I can't, at the same time, I can't complain. I I studied theater from the time I was, I don't know, 14 years old. So to me, I never just thought of playing roles that were gay characters. I just thought of like, what's the interesting role and what's the human condition that we're investigating, and what's the story that we're trying to tell. So I try not to just winnow it down to one or the other, I guess.
So it's so important we have people like Ryan who are able to create these three-dimensional characters for actors like
Yeah,
you.
Ryan's incredible in giving opportunities to every member of the LGBTQ spectrum, and he uses his platform well because oftentimes in a movie, they're looking for financing when they're casting somebody, and different people come with different price tags, especially in these little indie movies that are maybe $1 or $3 million. You have to cast someone who's going to get the money for the movie, otherwise the movie just doesn't get made. But when you have an entity like Ryan Murphy, where the brand is already there, the audience is already there, so he's using his platform to give opportunities to others and help them to tell the stories as authentically as possible.
Deborah Henderson, who's viewing on YouTube, asks, what was the most difficult part of playing Felix? What scene scared you the most when you read the script?
Oh, goodness. I don't, I mean, there's so many challenging scenes, but they're also, as an actor, they're so meaty, they're like what you've always dreamed of getting to do as an actor, telling a story that you feel like is bigger than that's more important than just you're having to get outside yourself. and let your ego go and just try to let the story tell itself in many ways. But there's such great stakes to the scenes, and so yeah, they're really really scary. I think one of the harder scenes for me is when there's a scene where Felix and Ned are at their house in the Hamptons, and Felix is trying to figure out how to tell Ned that he's found this spot on his foot, and he goes into this monologue beforehand, and there's so much going on underneath the scene, and you don't want to, you don't want to overplay your hand there. It just has to be there going on underneath the scene. So I would say scenes like that were probably more challenging. And then, some of the other scenes that are so iconic, when Ned is upset with Felix and he's throwing milk at him and things like that, you know, you're just trying to be in the moment with a great actor like Mark Ruffalo and see what happens.
Yeah, there's so many levels and beats to those scenes in the cottage that, have all that subtext underneath.
Yeah.
There's a great question from a TIFF member, Mikhail Dam, which is a nice one to end on. He asks, what did Larry Kramer teach you that we need to carry into the future?
Well, for me personally, I love Larry's sense of humor and his curiosity, but I think for all of us as a community, it is to stand up and raise our voice and make our voice heard, and to speak out and come together as a community when we need to, and to love and honor and accept ourselves and treat ourselves, regardless of what anybody else tells us, as deserving of everything that any human being is deserving of, and to take pride in who we are.
That's a really great message and reminder for all of us not able to celebrate Pride physically this year, to tell ourselves. So I think I can speak for all of us when I say we look forward to seeing you in The Boys in the Band.
Fantastic.
This year, we hope. But tonight, to mark Pride Month in this digital way, we return to the normal heart. Here in Canada, we'll hit play on the film at 7:30 on the East Coast, 4:30 if you're watching on the West Coast. We're watching on Crave here in Canada, but wherever you are, you should seek out the normal heart and watch with us. We'll be tweeting along using the hashtag #TIFFAtHome. Matt, thank you for being a leader in our community, for helping us to connect to a whole generation that we lost through Felix.
I appreciate that. I don't know if I'm any of those things, but it was a real honor of a lifetime to get to be a part of a movie like this. And I thank you for having me, and thank you for showing the film.
Thank you for joining us for Stay at Home Cinema.